Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of What If Civilization Started Over. In the last episode, we saw a few events happen, such as the Tibetan Revolution in the RPGAU. Um, that's actually it I can remember. Oh, we also had the island survivor religion start popping up. It started out here on this small island, and then spread out. And there's some in the Caribbean and some in the Mediterranean as well. And we also saw this. We saw what South China's been doing, we'll say. But if you enjoyed today's episode of What If Civilization Started Over, make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get started. Alright, so we're gonna start off here with the Tibetan Revolution. As we see these groups out here have started expanding a bit, or expanding their core territory a bit more. And this goes for all of the groups. I'm just trying to get these ones here to start. These groups have also expanded out, like how or what lands they've taken over from RPG. Because uh, alright, let's redo that. Okay, so at this point, these groups have gotten to about this, and the main areas have. In the core territory, these main separatist groups, they've gotten pretty big as well. Some of them even connecting up to each other. So, something like this. These two here don't really expand all too much, nor do the ones up along um, the Tibetan border. But we see these groups now finally starting to claim over a bit more territory, move into more territory. They really only rebelling from the RPGAU, however, and they continue to expand along the Bangladesh border, even moving into along the Indian border. However, their movements down south are slow. Eh, As I see these groups all start connecting up as well, no areas or no pockets for the RPGAU to exist in until they start moving up to create a very large pocket. And then we see the actual Tibetans up here are starting to like create this as core territory in some areas. It's only for the northern ones right now, but these these sections in each of these are now considered core territory by the Tibetan and the people of these areas too. But we'll move on from this, as we now go over to this general area. So, with the Great Empire They're one of six nations that hold a piece of either Switzerland or or Italy. But down here in Italy, they, as the strongest nation, own the capital province for both of them, or not really own it, but and North France owns two in each, and West France owns two in each. Catalonia owns two in each. Germany owns these parts, and the Adriatic Union owns these parts here. But the Great Empire is they have easy access to these areas. Fish, planes do exist, but they're spending a lot of resources, especially for the capital province, to keep them under control. Looking at stability, uh, they're they're all red stability, all of them. So that means they're not good at all. And we start realizing that as people from both of these areas start full on revolting. This is only in the capital province right now, but if I go into here, some popularity in the Italian capital province, it has begun to rebel. And eventually, the the Great Empire will decide to let both the Italian capital province and the Swiss capital province to be their own nation once again. However, I mean, they're just they are both only one province right now. So we'll give them their capitals for Swiss and the Italians. Obviously, their capital's going to be in the same spot, roughly the same spot. You know what? We'll leave capitals on. Because now we just move a bit north to find another war is happening. This time, it turns out Eng- these English folk. I don't know why I said it like that, but oh, I'm on the religion. Why was I on the religion map? All right, the people in England, they're seeming to be a bit expansionist. Obviously, they can't go south. These are two top 20 powers. If I do, yeah, both of them are top 20 powers. If they go north, these guys don't really offer a whole lot, other than Scotland, offers quite a bit of resources, but um, they have to go through these guys. And I mean, still, these guys are a relatively new nation. Ireland is stronger than them, so that's probably not a good fight. And these guys, well, they offer more coastal access into the Atlantic, but that's pretty much it. So who are they going to invade? Well, they're going to decide to hop across the North Sea to a country that recently left their own alliance. And obviously, I'm talking about the Dutch. So they make a naval landing in the western part of the Dutch coastline and begin to move up through the nation. We eventually see someone who initially had been criticizing people for invading other nations was begin invading as well. That's right. So the North French begin to invade as they move up, taking over quite a few major cities, actually only taking over two, but they move in closer to a third. And we see a old colonizer, and someone who recently got beat in a very large civil war, will also join in on this war. Obviously, that's going to be Denmark. So the Danish make a naval landing. So the Danish will make a naval landing and capturing this major city, then moving south, hoping to capture this major city before the French do. But it's too late as the French have captured that major city and a lot of the areas surrounding here. And eventually, the, the Danish will decide to move in to capture this capital. And the English are a bit mad because that's what they wanted most, but we'll see what the peace treaty will look like. Alright, so here we see our peace treaty. North France. Alright, North France takes over all of this. The English will be taking all of this land, and the rest of it goes over to the Danish. So, that's not right. Wait, whoops. No, Germany doesn't fall to the Danish. Not yet. Alright, there we go. And then these 4 pixels go to North France. Alright, that should not have taken long to do, but did. Alright, so now with their newly acquired 2.5 major cities, England will decide to continue their conquest. Now realizing that there is actually some strategic importance to a nation they previously did not want, they will begin to invade Cornwall. And very quickly they capture the major city, the entire nation, and fully annex the entire nation. So that means we get rid of another 2 capitals. And looks like someone's starting to reform a small colonial empire. Yes, I'm talking about the Danish. They're still definitely one of the weaker, if not maybe the weakest nation in Europe. Actually, the weakest nation in Europe is Switzerland. Even though these guys aren't really in Switzerland right now. Such a Swiss area that's more down here, but oh well. Alright, so now the English have gained quite a bit more power, and now they're starting to be able to take on the Irish. And the Irish are realizing that, so they're going to go for more power too. And who are they going to invade? These guys along the border, these guys who don't share a border with England. Obviously, they're going to go for the Scottish. So they move in through the west side. Even though there's mountains up here, they don't really care and just blitz right through these. They come up taking these 2 islands and move south surrounding the capital. Eventually that capital is taken and the Irish will be fully annexing this nation. So, probably should have just used a paint bucket, but this'll do. Alright, so that means we can fish. That means we can get rid of another capital. So now we have three nations left in the British Isles, and someone definitely really wants to reform their colonial empire, as the Danish will begin invading this reddish brown country that I totally know the color of. They move in very quickly for being one of the weaker nations in Europe, and after very rapidly capturing the capital of this country, they will also be fully annexing it. And a lot of people are starting to get a bit worried. Starting to get a bit worried about Danish. They are one of the more nationalistic countries in the world, even though they are a democracy. Um, oh, these two now. I need to update this map, clearly. Some kind. Yeah, I definitely need to update that the ideology map. It's not the only map I need to update those. So, alright. So now we see the Danish have conquered more territory, and there's there's three relatively equal powers in the British Isles, but none of them are actually that strong. Best of these three countries is in like the top 40 at most, which would be Ireland. Alright, so now we move to the east. We move over to East Asia, where the first thing, or the last thing that happened in this area, well, other than the annexation of these countries over here, last thing to happen was a very, very large civil war. And yeah, we're gonna see that kind of spill out into another nation. Initially, it was just China and Korea, but now there begin revolts start appearing up in Siberia. They're another dark bluish color, but this time they're not like dark cyan or like this color, but whoops, they appear in the far northern areas, mainly mainly around in the rural parts. However, they do have this one major city far in the far north, and well, the Siberians don't really care much about this area right now. They are more focused on developing, I would say, probably like anywhere south of that line. But once rebellions start popping up a bit more south, then they're gonna start getting worried. And these rebellions may or may not be funded by someone who wants revenge. But yeah, it seems a lot of people are funding rebellions in other countries right now. But this rebellion's gonna go a lot quicker, as the nation supporting them is a top 20 power. You probably even know it, unless you haven't watched the world episode of World War One, which I just probably gave it away what country it is. If you haven't watched World War One, you definitely need to. as the next couple episodes are going to have a lot to deal with World War One and maybe even World War Two. But eventually, we see the uh, rebellion area start spreading down into these southern parts, start moving up towards Russia, and they start taking over these islands. But we finally see the the Square Alliance as a whole, actually. Taking a look at that, it does include these guys up here, but it also includes like Baikal Nation, South China, and Korea. And that's actually good. But for the time being, so, you see South China gets another colony. This is going to be colored in a slightly brighter version, but South China's pretty much taking over control of the colony. These guys, just so they can focus on themselves. And plus, South China is a really good colonizer. They only don't have land on Africa and Europe, but who knows? Maybe that could change. I mean, they're one of four colonial countries, unless you count this as colony or like that. It's the only real the only countries that are really colonial anymore are the Catalonians, obviously, West French, South Chinese, and uh, East or Siberia could be one, just because of that. And then also there could be these two, but I don't really think they're that colonial. And Denmark too, with their colony right here. I get off track a lot. Alright, so we see the rebellion, or the Siberian rebellion, will move down into this area here. They are, or the Siberians are able to hold out in that major city. However, they're pushed extremely far south, and this will cause them to lose complete control over this northern area. However, now we start seeing aid from these, from the Square Alliance. It's finally starting to arrive, as Lake Baikal is able to help Siberia push back in this area. Eventually, they are able to push into this first rebellion, which also has the first major city that they got. But once we see South Chinese help arrive out from the east, because South China took control over the colony out here, we see things are starting to rapidly fall apart for this nation. So the one nation that was supporting them will ask if they can get support from one of their allies that is directly south of them. That one nation who also kind of wants revenge on the Siberians, even though the Siberians didn't entirely go against what they don't support, what these guys are completely against. But they'll help fund the rebellion too, and this rebellion grows extremely large suddenly. And by extremely large, I do mean all of this. So suddenly, this thing looks a lot bigger than it actually is, than it was, and they are able to once again push against the um, square, or against Siberia. This seems to be going a bit back and forth. However, despite being an extremely strong country, or two extremely strong countries that are supporting this, one of them is current, or one of them just wants to do this for revenge, while the other is partially because this goes against their claims, and also one of the countries in the Square Alliance also goes against their or what they think is right and wrong. But these guys are able to completely push out the Siberians here and start pushing back against Lake Baikal as well. And then they start moving back in and take over the entire northern part of Siberia again. And this is definitely going to be a bit of back and forth war for a while until this rebellion starts spilling over into a couple other nations. And yes, I said a couple. 'Cause most of you who actually watched World War One know that the country that's probably wanting their revenge is Russia, and that is correct. Russia is supplying this rebellion. And the other country that started helping them is the RPGAU, of course. But this rebellion starts getting a bit too out of hand for Russia to control, as initially they were just gonna like make this kind of like a puppet, but then this rebellion starts spilling into Russian territory. Even right here, it goes through all three countries that are experiencing this rebellion. And this rebellion is starting to pop up in other nations as well, even. As part of it is even that seeing, or people supporting this are even seen down in Japan. Eventually, RPGAU is realizing if we keep supporting this, we could lose our ally. So the RPGAU is gonna stop supplying this, but Russia's gonna like there for whatever reason, Russia is gonna continue to supply this rebellion, despite it growing even more and more out of control, and it currently claim or currently has like a very very large portion of the it has a very very large portion of the Russian lands in the east. That about that this part of the line divides Russia into west and east, I would say, at least. No pun. I did not mean to rhyme that. But at the end of this, though, we see this rebellion has spread into four countries so far. But with Russia aiding this and even other few other triangle members like Sumatra, with everyone or almost all the triangle members supplying this, it's definitely gonna get out of hand, as we've already seen. But we move back down for our final event in this episode, as the Tibetans and the RPGAU will decide to make peace after all of this is captured by the Tibetans. Because the country supplying this is really strong as well. So, if you enjoyed today's episode of What If Civilization Started Over, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.